Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
Okay, so there's more to say there, but let's move on to our third item today. And you, Mike, you've written a three-part article on the ways in which image recognition, image understanding is impacting Google's search results and the larger role that they're playing in sort of local search. And so why don't you talk about that? We've got two of the articles
Sure.
up. The third one is coming either later today or Monday.
Right. So this took me 5 months to write. I've been thinking about it for a long time, just about the long trends involved in it, as well as the amount of technology that's involved in it. And this is one area where Google's AI is actually a very innovative and leading technology. But to a large extent, particularly on mobile, primarily on mobile, the SERPs, the search results, have become increasingly visual. When I did an actual analysis of the number of pixels allocated in a search result in 2016 to today, it went from 2% were images and visual stuff to almost 40% are images and visual today. So a dramatic increase in the amount of imagery and graphics on the SERP results page. One assumes that's because Google has tested it and that's what people really want. Also, a vast increase in the number of images and space in the local pack, in organic, but also in new universal formats where they're bringing in panels of images from, and I've written about this elsewhere, from their image collection, from order suite, from local shopping. They're bringing in panels of images and providing a more Pinterest-like interface to access those. So one big trend is Google just jamming the SERPs full of images. And the other that we're seeing is just their increasing ability to understand incredible nuance about what's in an image, the content of the image, the entities in the image, the colors of the image, the style of the clothing people are wearing in the image. They claim now to be able to understand. And in the article coming out either later today or next week, I will be detailing how this is impacting rank and conversions and what a business can do about it. But it is a huge trend in local and all of mobile search results that I think opens up all new areas of technical SEO.
Well, it definitely makes sense for mobile search results. I mean, even on I don't know what the size of the normal iPhone is today, 6 inches vertically or diagonally. It's still very difficult to read a lot of text, right? So a text-based kind of SERP on a mobile device is less user-friendly than one that's broken up by images. And so I think that makes sense from a usability standpoint. I don't know if you may have mentioned product inventory images. You wrote a piece about that. That's also kind of two trends coming together, right? Google's emphasis on local product inventory
Right.
and product images in the SERP and in the local pack as well. So that's another thing that's really interesting. And you've got a number of pieces. I don't know what the total number is. It's like 5 or 6 that touch on images in our analysis section on the site, which I would encourage people to check out. But this is a major trend, as you say, and it's something that people should not be ignoring.
And their AI is incredibly sophisticated, although at the same time, it's like all AI has this certain blind spot. You can see that in, I think, the second article where I compare two pictures of a dentist. One, Google clearly identifies as a dentist with their AI, and the other, it thinks it's about medical gloves or something. It's just fascinating, the small differences in image that so dramatically change Google's understanding of what's in an image. And it will be interesting to see how that and the reality of SEO and photography work to sort of change what's in images going forward. Will images become less emotive or less substantial or less creative because they're being asked to conform with Google's understanding of what an image is?
Almost certainly once people sort of reverse engineer what works about an image and what boosts rank, you're going to see a lot of people conform to that aesthetic or that standard, whatever that is. I mean, I'm Sure. Can you give
Right.
can you give people a little bit of a sense of some of your top level recommendations? That's in the third piece that's yet to publish, but
Sure. I mean, firstly, that every image that you're using should be run through their Image AI API, either at scale or dropped in on the website to see how Google understands it to make sure that that's the case. In terms of local, you want to be sure that you have images that reflect the categories of product that you're selling and not just one, but you need multiple images in a category because then Google will then segment your local profile
so in your
by
example,
by
it
that.
was jewelry, right? So different categories of jewelry is a concrete example of that.
Right. Rings and
Necklaces.
earrings and necklaces and engagement rings, etc. Also, you need to, every image needs to be a good one because the query is going to dictate what image shows. So you never know which image you're going to show. You have very little control over that. Also, you need to be sure that the profile image is a profile image that, I didn't talk about this in the article, but this is the case, similar to what Google is showing for that category. For example, if they're primarily showing frontage footage of your business, then you want a great picture of that. If you try to use a logo for that, Google may then take user generated content, which is much lower quality. And then finally, you need to be watching if you're in a business that's generating user generated content, then you need to be careful. And there's some interesting stuff that I didn't talk about in my article that I know Joy's going to be talking about it the next local U, but also how images are now being included with reviews and are influencing the persistence and
In
visibility
the
of
updates from
reviews.
users
So,
is one of the places where that.
there's one is updates from users and the other is in
Right.
reviews. Both places now accept images, and it seems to influence their visibility.
Well, what
So images are
one
going to play a big role,
one
or
thing that
are playing
struck
a
me,
big
I
role.
think, about the second piece you wrote, and this is kind of consistent with what David was talking about with Google kind of uh, doing this sort of involuntary data replacement, is Google is going to determine. I mean, if you talk about the user generated images and the challenge for business owners where people are uploading photographs. Speak to that for a second, like.
So Google at every opportunity is encouraging local guides to upload images. If you're in a physical area and you walk by a business, you may get a ping from Google. Obviously, in other businesses, it's common that people upload images. I've uploaded images just to get points, as I pointed out in another article in their local guide program. And those images were not the ones I am necessarily most proud of. And they may be seen 3 or 4 or 5 million times by Google's counting, which even if it's off by an order of magnitude, it's still a lot. These images get seen a lot. Now, it means that you will need to control your images by keeping them fresh, continuing to upload new images so that there's a strong predilection in Google's image ranking algorithm for freshness. So if you're in a business where there's a lot of user generated images, either you have to work with users that help them get better images, or you need to upload your images more frequently to keep those down in the view, because they may or may not reflect your brand image, and then also report them if they're terrible. Your dog
Yes,
agrees.
she agrees with the strategy of periodically updating images. But I mean, that's a big problem if you're a business owner and you spend a bunch of money creating some nice images with a professional photographer, and you upload them and they get overwritten or superseded, not overwritten, but superseded by a bunch of user generated mediocre images. That's going to be a real risk.
Right. And we're seeing some indication. I have some early research from Patient Pop that indicates that dripping images in provides more uplift to visibility than just loading them all up and forgetting about them. So it appears to be that Google is at some level rewarding persistent image uploading, which hasn't been tested that broadly in the past, although it's consistent with other signals they're sending. They did also, as we noted, I think last week, update their how to rank in Google by adding photos and product inventories are both in there now. So they're clearly sending signals that they want images. They're clearly showing images a lot more. And I think in some ways, it's it's the subtle signal that people convert on. I think having great images, I'm trying to find the research on this, but I am convinced that having a great image that communicates to people is really one of the best ways to get conversion. So I'm bullish on images.
Yeah, I remember a Bing survey from, probably 10 years ago now, maybe even longer, saying that at least in the restaurant vertical, it was like the number 2 thing that people wanted from a restaurant profile was hours of operation. Number 2 is images.
Yeah, and Google research, which wasn't published, it's a similar research that was done in 2014, but was redone in 2017. And they gave me access to the data. And it was a big number. I don't know, 90% of people trusted businesses more with images, and 74% used it as a primary.
Yeah, and Yelp has research that validates that too. Profiles with more images and better images do better than profiles with fewer images or less, lower quality images. I mean, it makes intuitive sense, because what we're trying to do as consumers when we search online is we're trying to get as much of a sense of the business, through whatever pieces of information, reviews, descriptions, and images as we can. And so more images give you a sense of what the reality of the offline experience is. I mean, how many times have you looked at the vibe area in on the Google profile to see what the interior of a restaurant is like, right? I mean, the food is great, but is that a place that you want to hang out, or is it like a grab and go or something? So it just makes complete sense. I mean, in this case, Google is really, generally speaking, Google tries to do what they think users want and what their research reflects users want, and sometimes that works for the business, and a lot of the time it doesn't. So, all right, well, we've come to the end of another interesting discussion. Hopefully interesting for you, certainly interesting for us, and we'll be back next week with episode 61. We also want to say that we are working on a monetization plan, and we will be communicating about that pretty soon. We've got some exciting new things coming in the beginning of May, and we'll be letting you know what those are, and your opportunity to pay for them, because we have to support this somehow. And so we're starting to do that. So hopefully you'll be interested. Any last statements from you guys?
I would put out a request to anybody listening that if you know a photographer who is very thoughtful about commercial photography, who has explored the issues involved with presenting images at very low pixel resolutions, which is what local is. It's like 150 by 200 pixels. I would love to chat with them. So send them my way, mblumenthal@nearmedia.co. I'd love to chat with them. So I'm just looking to increase my understanding of the constraints around photography in a commercial environment for digital.
Okay. All right, great. So thanks very much for listening. As always, have a great holiday, whatever tradition you celebrate, or have fun if you don't celebrate any of them. And we'll be back next week.
For joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.